How do you feel about God?
I think he's a pretty cool guy.
Think it's real?
Yeah,
Really?
yeah.
Why don't you tell me your belief?
Okay. Um, where do you want me to start?
Why do you believe in God?
Uh, well, very complicated question. But
Is it really?
um, yeah. I think anything's a complicated question.
Anything?
Ultimately,
All
there's
things? What did you
yeah.
have for breakfast? Is that a complicated question?
Well, it's assuming that that the term breakfast actually has meaning.
Yeah, I mean, there's the colloquial
Yeah.
definition of breakfast. Anywhere
Um,
between, I don't know, 4 o'clock in the morning to, I don't know,
is
10,
breakfast for
10:30-ish.
dinner still breakfast? Is breakfast for dinner still breakfast, or is that?
You get my point.
Oh,
Anyway, it's not a complicated question. You don't have to think about it too
hmm.
hard. Just think about it a little bit, and you already have a quick answer. So, why do you believe in
Okay.
God?
Well, because the uh the paradigm that is Orthodox Christianity makes the most cohesive argument for the entire for like the whole functionality of the world.
Okay. And you don't
It's
think
the
that like a
only
non-anthropomorphic entity could be the cause of things? But
well, not
this thing
necessarily. I'm
that
not.
that existed to the east side of the Himalayas in Fable, that's the one that's most correct. Which also happens to be
So
where your ancestors come from.
so specifically the Eastern Orthodox understanding of the Trinity and the Triad is the only way for um for any sort of God to exist. And if we compare sort of paradigms between Orthodox Christianity and atheism, you see that there's a very big hole that can't be filled with under the
Are you
sort of
saying what
atheistic
created the
paradigm.
universe? Are you saying
Nope,
that we don't have an
nope.
answer for that?
I'm actually making a different and more fundamental argument than that.
Okay.
I
Are you
I
saying
think
like
we've
what roots
tried
all logic? All right, cool.
basically
Yeah,
transcendental
why would you place an
argumentation.
anthropomorphism of the thing that roots all logic?
Well, because it can't not be anthropomorphic
What?
for one, but
Why not? It's beyond space
well,
time. Why would you
then
apply any anthropomorphic properties to it?
well because there's no the universe can't have or like the world can't have telos without an anthropomorphic being.
What? It could literally be non anthropomorphic and it would be just as cogent.
Uh, just as what?
It can be entirely non anthropomorphic and still cogent.
What does that mean?
It still makes sense. It
Well, I'm
logically
not
follows.
necessarily
Like I
talking
can
about
invoke
telos.
all of your properties of the universe, and I could, well, for one, it's kind of assuming that there is that the universe in itself isn't asymptotic, and it does have an initial first cause mover. But let's go ahead and just grant you that okay, there could be an initial first cause mover. All right, well, I could literally just say that's a non-anthropomorphic entity. Why would it be an
Well, I'm
anthropomorphic
not.
entity? It exists beyond space time. It makes no sense to
I'm al-
apply an anthropomorphism to it.
I'm not arguing for the first cause. I'm arguing a better argument, which is the
You're saying
transcendental
the root of
argument.
all logic.
It goes much further than that.
All right.
Because
I asked
logic
you
is only a
earlier
way.
if that was what your argument was. You said basically. So, what is your argument?
Yeah. So my argument is that there are these transcendental categories which are used like in any form of anything.
That's just the
So,
root of all logic. That's literally exactly what I said earlier. You're just saying that the root of all logic without saying the root of all logic.
Yeah, well, everything from language to logic to truth to numbers to all of that. These are all transcendental categories.
Yeah, I'm saying that I can invoke a non-anthropomorphic entity of the root of all these things, and it would be just as cogent, if not more.
More cogent than
Yeah,
an anthropomorphic being.
yeah, correct. Because
Okay.
you're talking about something that exists beyond space-time, and if you're going to say that there is something beyond space-time that somehow possesses these anthropomorphic properties, how?
I'm not arguing that that like this specifically possesses all these anthropomorphic properties. I haven't even started like the root of my argument yet.
Sure.
I'm just stating like we have all these transcendental categories, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything from logic to numbers to the truth to knowledge to consciousness. They don't exist in the world. Like that, you
What?
can't
They
take them.
exist.
You
We can
can't.
show them.
All right, show me a logic right now.
Show you a logic. A equals A.
Yes. Oh, where can I see that?
Hmm?
Like
You
where
are
in
able to
sense
look at
data?
things possessing A categories, being like other A categories from inductive reasoning.
So where
You
in
could, for
sense data
example,
do
look at
we?
this. This is a solid object, given the fact that things don't pass through it. This also doesn't have things that
So
pass through it, and so it is like that other thing in the fact that it's a solid object. There you go. A equals A.
so where in sense data do we get the proposition that A equals A?
All you have is the inductive reasoning to operate that
And
explanation.
where in sense data do we find inductive reasoning?
Where in sense data that you find inductive, that's literally all induction is.
What do you mean?
That's all induction is. Induction is using your sense data. Like you use your like what seems to be the case and then operate off of those logical principles.
So
Are you saying like reality could maybe not be reality or something? Something weird like that? Or you're questioning
well, I'm
reality
saying
in order to make God work?
no. I'm saying that like if you're taking this from a purely materialistic sort of empiricist paradigm, there's no way to justify logic at all.
Yeah,
There's no
there
way
is.
to justify.
I literally did it in front of you. It's called you use a not you can one. There's the possibility that the universe could be asymptotic in its basis, and there's also the fact that you can invoke a non-anthropomorphic eternal. There, done. I just did it.
And where is this said eternal?
It would be
For one.
beyond space
And
time, and
also-
it creates universe. But it doesn't really care whether or not humans exist. It just kind of exists, making universe. It's kind of like if like a rock existed or like if Jupiter existed. The rock in Jupiter doesn't really care whether or not you exist. It just exists. And so
Alright,
like
so-
this
so getting back-
non-anthropomorphic entity would likely be that, considering it literally makes universes. And considering that there's 7 septillion planets in this universe, and that's within our observable universe, not the unobservable universe, meaning it's much bigger than that, that would mean that like whatever this is probably like sees billions to trillions of different intelligent species. So why would it give a shit about you?
Going back to my original point, logic. How can you justify logic?
I
Where
literally
in
did that
sense
already.
data?
Okay, so I'm gonna do
But
it
you didn't.
again for you. Okay,
So-
one,
so wait,
I can
what-
invoke
what-
I can
so-
invoke an asymptotic universe, or B,
So-
I can invoke that the God itself is not actually a God, but is simply like a non-anthropomorphic entity that makes universe. Done. I just invoked logic through these two bases. It could be either or. It
It's
doesn't
still
matter.
not. This still isn't answering the question. Like, what presuppositions are you going off of that tells you sort of the nature of the universe? Like, are you like uniformity?
You would have to
uniformity
use.
in nature.
I mean, like the
or
way that you
identity over
determine things to
time?
be true versus not true is going to be based on prediction. You use your inductive
what justifies
processes, which may
prediction?
or may not be wrong, and then on the basis of like what may or may not be wrong, you can then make predictions off of it, and that which is closer to the predictive quality is more correct. Done.
So, what about reasoning tells us what the nature of reasoning is? Or what about
Are
nature
you
tells us
saying
about
what
the
reasoning is reasoning? That's a circular question. Can you ask again in like a more cogent way that actually makes sense?
what what about nature this tells us about nature? Like if
Hmm?
I'm looking at something,
Well, you can observe that nature appears to be a thing. It exists, right? Like, are you saying that nature doesn't
well,
exist?
how do you know that this isn't some sort of hallucination?
I mean, I suppose it could be, but we have no indication that that's the case.
And are you making that off of the presupposition that
Yeah, off of
that
inductive
there's
reasoning,
uniformity in
yes.
nature? Off of that there's
Yes, there
uniformity in
appears to be
nature,
a
and that
uniformity in
there's
nature. That's true.
identity over time, and that identity exists,
Well, the
and that
identity
time
only exists
exists.
because we are like humans and we try to like establish patterns into things. But yeah,
Well, say for a second, I can't actually
like
see the
Jupiter
screen, but
doesn't like look at like other planets and being like, "Oh, I'm like these planets." No, it's not conscious to be aware to like
so
create like these categories. We as like ape creatures, we look at these and then establish categories because it makes our brain chemicals go, "Yeah, I like this."
so do these categories exist?
Yeah, in our brains, yes.
Okay, and what is the evidence? What is the sense data that tells us that these things exist in our brain?
Prediction.
That doesn't answer the question.
What? Yeah, it does.
What in what in sense data tells us that these incidental categories exist in our
Are
minds?
you questioning whether or not your senses could ever be correct?
I'm I'm like doing an internal critique. Where
Okay,
in sense
yeah.
data?
So, like, it
What
is
what
true that your
what, what
senses could be incorrect, but at the same time, you use prediction to determine whether or not that your sense data is in fact correct or not.
so where in sense data does it tell us that um where in sense data does it tell us that prediction gives us accurate predictions towards the nature of sense data?
Well, so like we infer a prediction and then we sense it with our organs, and then we observe that the prediction works. So it's
So
likely closer to truth than not.
so so sense data tells us that we see things, and
Hmm.
because we see things,
We
that
can infer
tells us
things off of those things, and then on the basis of those things, we make predictions. And then with those predictions, they either are correct or not correct. If they are not correct, we are likely less correct in terms of the truth. But if we are more correct, we are more correct in terms of the truth.
so sense data gives inputs into the mind, and these inputs in the mind tell us about sense data in
You're
sense
invoking like a
data.
circular logic, and what it is not necessarily the sense data, but the fact that you can predict it.
Yeah, but prediction doesn't exist.
Yeah, it does. We do it all the time.
Show me prediction. Yeah, so where
I
in
predict
sense data does
at
it tell?
6 o'clock this TV show will show on, and then it shows on.
So
There you go.
where in
Prediction.
sense data, where in sense data do you find prediction?
I just gave it to you. That was one example.
No,
TV show.
that wasn't an
Turns out at
example.
5 o'clock. I look at the guide, and I see that this TV show's at 5 o'clock. I show up at 5 o'clock, and then boom, it shows up.
So where in sense data does it tell us that it's 5 o'clock?
That's sense data.
5 o'clock.
I look at a clock. The clock
no.
says it's 5 o'clock.
That's
I look at my
no.
phone.
That's
The phone says it's 5 o'clock.
that's not
That is what that is.
5 o'clock. 5 o'clock doesn't exist. 5 o'clock is a
Yeah,
it's a
yeah. I
transcendental.
understand that that's still like a construct that we as humans have invented on the basis of like the ecliptical of our Earth. But the problem is that I look at this thing based on the rotation of the planet being the time, and that it is in fact 5 o'clock, and it also happens to coincide with this exact show that I like to watch. So I make the prediction that this show will show up. There it is. So yes, I can in fact do that. I require no
So-
invocation of your god.
I'm not even at that point. I'm like still questioning Um, where in sense data does it tell us that it's 5 o'clock?
You
Or
look at
where
the
in sense
clock.
data does it?
You look at a clock.
So, yeah, give me a second. Uh, what is a number? Like, I guess I'm gonna move away from that, move away from my previous point. But what is a number?
Number is determined based off of an inductive logic of a objects that we observe or ideas that we observe, and then those ideas being like other things or those things being like other things and comparing them to one another, and then creating a symbol to determine how many of those things. That's what
Okay,
number is.
so say I have 2 coconuts, right? Where on these coconuts do I perceive two?
Yeah, you don't. It's an idea that we've created to invoke
Okay,
concepts.
so the number doesn't exist.
No, the number exists. It's just that we use an idea to determine it.
Does it exist as a quote unquote abstract concept?
Yes, it is an abstraction.
So so it's transcendental.
Well, I mean, you can determine whether or not that it outputs to predictive outcomes, which it in fact does, and so it would be closer to truth
Okay,
than not.
so what is the difference between 2 coconuts and
So
two
I'm just
oranges?
curious, right? Like, are you just like going to question like whether or not that like my reality is reality, or are we going to talk about your God? Because you sat there and you said that I need to use this God, but here I am answering question after question and solidly answering it. And you're saying that, like, how do you know whether or not that you can even question reality being reality? So I'm curious as to whether or not that you can even, like, justify a God position. You said it's more logical than the not God position. I'm asking to you, do you invoke an anthropomorphic entity outside space time? Why?
Because it's
Why would
the
you not? It's
like
asymptotic. Or like that it's non-anthropomorphic because it's beyond space-time.
because what we're dealing with here is a difference in paradigms, and ultimately the transcendental argumentation is trying to discern between 2 paradigms.
Let
And
me
I'm
ask you
trying to
this: do
get
you
us.
think that if you were born west of the Himalayas, would you believe in the same thing, or would you like believe in something else, like Confucius or like
I,
the Bhagavad Gita,
that's
or
it's arbitrary.
no? I'm asking if you were born east of the Himalayas. That's not arbitrary. I'm asking you: do you think it's possible?
Possible that I could have been born
If you
east of
were
the
born
Himalayas.
east of the Himalayas, do you think that you would believe in the same thing?
I mean, that's sort of an arbitrary question because I wasn't born there, so
It
I
doesn't
don't
matter
know.
if it's arbitrary or not. I'm asking you, do you think?
I mean, I do think,
Okay,
um,
so do you
but
think that it is that you would likely believe in something else if you were born east of the Himalayas as opposed to west?
I I I don't know because I wasn't
You can't
born
know,
east of the
really?
Himalayas. Yeah, I
Well, I
can't
mean,
know
think about the
because that's
demographics.
not.
Think about all of the people that live
I don't.
east of the Himalayas. You've got Confucians, you've got Hindus, you've got Taoists, you've got Shintoists, you've got all sorts of religions that exist. But you know what seems to be missing? Christianity. You know what also seems to be missing? Catholicism.
Oh, actually,
So I'm
you
going to
know, I'm
ask
not
you
a
this,
Catholic.
right? Very basically.
I'm not a Catholic. I'm gonna
I'm
make
not
that clear.
arguing whether
One,
or
I'm
not you're
not
a Catholic
Catholic.
or not. I'm
Whoa,
asking
wait.
you,
And two, there's actually an Orthodox church in Japan, like
I'm
we have
saying,
an
think about the
autocephalous church
demographics.
of Japan.
I'm saying, think about the demographics, right? Most people are
The
not
dev- it,
Christian, right? In those
okay,
areas, right?
What's this?
You believe in
This doesn't mean
Christianity,
anything.
right?
Yeah. So this is
Okay.
what this is.
Wait, 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 wait,
This is
wait,
an
wait.
art. This is an ad populum
It's not
heresy.
an
This
ad
has nothing to
populum
do with.
argument. This gets way more difficult. Trust me.
Okay,
This is just the
go
beginning.
for it. Go for it.
So, obviously, anybody like worth their own logic would know that if you were born east of the Himalayas, you likely would not be a Christian. Most people who are east of the Himalayas are not a Christian. And the reason why is because that you would not have grown up with it. You didn't have parents, you didn't have society around you telling you to be Christian. You didn't have a shit ton of churches, every single like block. And so you likely wouldn't have been Christian. You would have likely have believed in a Hare Krishna, or you would have believed in a Buddha, or you would have been a Confucian and would have been an atheist. The point is that it would have
But what
depended
if
on where you grew up in. And so if
what if I
that's the
told
case,
you-
right? No, here's the kicker. If that's the case, God is supposed to be the progenitor of the entire universe, all of it. That would mean he transcends space-time. He transcends the minds of individuals. He should be able to affect every individual's mind. But it turns out when you go east of the Himalayas, which is really hard for humans to cross, all of a sudden they believe in a different thing completely. And a lot of the times it's antithetical. So that tells me that you likely believe in this God on the basis of your culture. Man made these religions.
So, all right. I have a question for you. What do you think the demographics is of Orthodoxy in America?
I don't know. White people, Hispanic
it's
people.
no, like the percentage. Like if you were to give a percent,
I
what
don't
do you
know.
think it is?
Not off the top of my head, I don't know.
It's like it's less than 1%. Well, actually, it's like less than 5%. So I think we
I
have
mean,
over.
like, as opposed to what? Christianity? Like Christian, there's like over 70% of people are Christians in the United States.
Okay.
So it's kind of interesting. Like, are you in the
Yeah,
United States?
and I'm saying-
you have a U.S. accent.
Yes.
So like, okay, so I find it
No,
interesting.
I am.
You happen to believe
And-
in this thing that everybody else believes in.
I don't believe what all the other people believe in.
What is the difference between Orthodoxy and Christianity?
It depends. Are you talking about Protestantism and Catholicism
Well, I'm
versus
talking about
Orthodoxy? 'Cause
Christianity and Orthodoxy.
there. Orthodoxy is Christianity,
Yeah, I know.
but not all
I'm
Christianity is
aware.
Orthodoxy.
That's why I'm bringing up
Yeah.
how silly this point is.
So
You said it's 2%, but
Well-
it's not. It's like 70%. There's just differences in different Christian
No.
sects, and you
It's-
say, "Well, we're
no,
like
it's
a
not.
minority," but the reality is you're not a minority. You're definitely the majority. And not
No,
only are
so-
you the majority, you are overwhelmingly supported by your politicians in power.
So, well, for one, Orthodoxy is not involved with politics because the Orthodoxy is the historic church.
Christianity is.
No, it's so I don't actually believe that these people are genuine.
I want to
Christians.
get back to it, which is my initial question. I think it's a very important question.
Okay. And
Why
I
would
mean,
you
I can go
invoke
I
an
can go through
anthropomorphic entity to the creation of the universe or creation of all logic and matter?
Well, if you'll give me a few minutes to explain the
for it,
whole
dude.
position,
You got it.
and I'll go for it.
You got it.
So if we're I see the No True Scotsman. I can go through that whole thing too, but that's a different story for that's a different story. But I'll get into
I'm talking to the chat.
I'll get into transcendental argument. Yeah. So basically, there are all these transcendental categories, and we rely on certain presuppositions that cannot be justified without making an account
Already
for
justified
these transcendental categories. Let me talk. Said transcendental categories cannot exist within the human mind alone, because they are specific. There are certain universal categories that we cannot justify in any sort of empiricist or naturalistic worldview. With that being said, there's only one. The only way to justify these transcendental categories is with the transcendental mind. But and this transcendental mind can only have specific properties that are within the continuity of Eastern Orthodoxy, because ultimately the triad is the only logical and only possible transcendental position. So when we get into sort of the theological aspects and the transcendental justification, we have sort of the autotheos, the autotheos of God, right? And we have his creation, which is separate ontologically from the divine nature of God. So they are separate and they are distinct. And us being a lesser form of a lesser creation, we as ourselves do not have the faculties to understand such a transcendent being. And so the only way for this transcendent being to establish the very structures of the universe and of the mind, of consciousness, and everything, um, he has to have a way that is like separate from himself, not separate, but distinct from the divine essence. There must be a distinction between um, there must be a distinction between the transcendental properties of the universe, the transcendental properties of creation, and the ultimate transcendental form that is the divine essence. This is present as the Logos. This is Christ, who is the sole foundation for the entire universe, all of creation. Is founded transcendentally on the Logos. And you must have a way for the Logos to interact with the world and for the Logos to actually, for the Logos to actualize itself, which is through the Spirit. Um, like ultimately, and forgive me if I am not arguing this as fully as I could be able to, because I am a novice. I don't know everything about the transcendental argument, so if I get anything wrong or if it doesn't make sense, then I'm fine by that, because I'm not well learned enough in it anyway. But um, anyways, these have like very fundamental nature of the universe is founded on these transcendental categories, which are the logos, which like are founded completely on the logos, which is distinct but not separate from the autotheos, the hyperousios of the divine essence, which is God, who is utterly transcendent. We cannot perceive God in his fullness, but it is through the expression that he gave as the logos, which is the very foundation of these transcendentals that we observe, like everything from logic to truth to knowledge to consciousness to the mind to everything everything that we can observe that is uh, outside of what is raw data and raw material. Because there must be a justification or argumentation in the first place, and there is no sense data doesn't give us a justification for argument itself. Just sense data gives us information, but information is perceived within a paradigm, and it is by the paradigm that we understand the world. And there is no way to understand the world outside of a paradigm um, because it's nonsensical. It's saying, oh, well, if you have no paradigm and everything is raw data, then you'd have to sort of come to the conclusion that either everything around you is a brute fact, which, excuse me, which you can't justify because you have no paradigm to justify it under, or that there is no such thing as truth and there is no such thing as fact, and that there is no such thing as anything outside of what is raw data that we can't understand, that we can't even profess to understand. So the very foundation of logic itself, the very foundation that allows us to make arguments at all, must be founded in something that is transcendent of what we see in the raw physical material world. Which is why I argue that in order to justify these transcendental categories, we must have a transcendental mind which is able to make itself known in the world and is the very foundation
How
of the
much
world
longer do
itself.
I need to be listening? You've repeated
To
yourself
go-
about 3 times now.
you
I've tried to be polite
speak,
and let you finish, but you've spoken 3 times the same
Speak.
topic, and again, I just fundamentally disagree with you.
speak.
Why would you assume an anthropomorphic entity? I could easily. No, you are. You are.
You've glazed over.
You're saying that something needs to be transcendental to be there, right? Yes.
You've glazed. No, I'm saying
something needs to be transcendental in order to invoke logic. Yes.
On the very foundation of what I said, there is no way to justify anything outside of a paradigm, right?
Yeah, so you are invoking something to solidify these logical properties. Yes?
So
what is that thing?
We compare.
What are you using to invoke all logic? Is it God?
What do you mean by invoke
What
all
are
logic?
you using to invoke logic? You're saying that I can't make a logical argument because I'm not invoking something. What is it? Is it God?
No, you can't make an argument because you don't have the justification for argument
Correct.
to begin with.
So what is the thing that justifies it? Is it God?
I'm comparing these paradigms. And ultimately...
I'm asking you, what is it? What is it? Just answer.
The very foundation...
God,
the very foundation of argumentation and logic itself is the transcendental mind, which is
it God? Okay, thank you.
Yes.
All right, cool. All right. I can invoke a non-anthropomorphic being.
How?
I'm doing it now. So rather than there being Sky Daddy, or like a mind, and that it thinks, and that it cares about humans, and that it's this holy trinity, all again anthropomorphizations as to what would be beyond space-time, because it invokes a concept such as object. Like, okay.
It can't
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. What is this?
I can't see the stream.
You don't see my stream? Click my stream.
It's buffering. That's it.
Are you serious? It's buffering? Can everybody see it?
It works for everyone else.
All right, here. I'll just. Can someone just screenshot this and post this in side chat? What is this? Apogu, do me a favor. Just screenshot this and post it in side chat.
Glass. Okay. Is it a?
What is that?
Yeah, it's a cup. All right.
What is that?
It's a cup.
It's a cup.
That is a cup.
A glass. You called it a glass.
Why? Yeah, somebody else.
Why did you call it a glass? Or a cup? Why would you call it? How about the? Yeah. Why would you call it a cup? Why is it a cup?
Well, it's a cup because it has a telos and the specific telos that we provided
telos.
To be used.
Why is it called a cup? No one says that. Why is it called a cup? Just say, use your own basic logic. What is this?
There's no such thing as basic logic. It's a.
The reason why it holds it is a cup is because it's got liquid, right? It holds liquid. That's why we call it a cup.
Okay.
Right?
What's the evidence?
It's not telos. It's got water in it or something in it, and it holds that liquid, right?
The telos is that it holds liquid.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
The idea of cup doesn't exist without telos.
Correct. Okay. Stop. Just please.
No. That's
the reason why I'm bringing up this cup is because in order to invoke cup, you need to actually have space-time to allow cup. So space-time is going to be the fabric of reality that, when excited, allows atoms to then form under certain conditions that then bind to other atoms that then create multiple molecules that then combine to one another to then create this finite thing that we refer to as cup, being not like cup things. And it possesses properties that we refer to as cup, such as hold liquid, right?
So you described the physical makeup of a cup, and then you gave a description of the telos of a cup.
I just want you to answer it.
you gave two different perspectives of what cup is. You said one
I
material
understand that you're trying to get
being
stuck
glass,
on the
right?
invocation of this God. I want to get back
So
to
no,
this.
no, no, wait,
So here's
wait,
the
I'm trying
problem
to
with
wait.
your argument. You are
Give me a
arguing
second to
that there
speak.
is the
Wait,
anthropomorphic
wait.
thing being the God
I-
beyond space-time. The problem that you are saying it has a mind, that it has a holy trinity, that it cares about us, that that it has any invocation of our existence. If it's beyond space-time, it would not have time principles. It would also not have principles of properties that we invoke through inductive logic, such as cup being like other cup things or not cup things. Because there is no
so here's the
space-time to make that happen, okay? So it is possible that the property is that it has all of the properties and none of them at the same time. That is totally logical outside of space-time because you don't know what the stage is like. So I'm asking you again, why do you invoke an not just something that you can invoke as having like a singular or a trinity, but that it possesses anthropomorphic properties such as a mind? How? Why is that more logical than this thing that just makes universe?
Because transcendental categories are anthropomorphic. It can't exist outside.
Do you understand? You're saying it's anthropomorphic because it's anthropomorphic. I'm saying you cannot logically make that argument. It is not logical to assume that. I'm not making an anthropomorphization of something that exists beyond space-time. In fact, it's more logical to think that if it is beyond space-time, whatever it is, if we observed it, it would not make any sense to us. First of all, there would be no photon that would go beyond the space-time and then come back for us to perceive anything. It would be incomprehensible to us. We wouldn't know what we're looking at. It would just be like this, hell, who the fuck knows? It could be anything.
Oh, let's get back to the example of the cup, right? So you have this cup that's, it's particles of silicon and oxygen, and it's made up into the specific shape that has volume. This comes with specific presuppositions that lay within specific transcendental categories that we cannot justify using raw sense data. And my question is,
we do it all the time. What do you mean? No, that's not true. We do that all the time.
Because you're making presuppositions about.
Yeah, you use presuppositions and then you use prediction, and then the prediction will tell you things about that thing.
Yeah, and
so it's not circular because our senses could be wrong. That's true, but then we use prediction to then arrive to conclusions that are continual and finite, and based on the predictions that we know, we then do measurements on those bases, and it works. So no, it's what you're saying is wrong. We do it all the time. The fact that you're on a computer right now making arguments is proof that our presuppositions work.
So wait, you're saying that sense data can bring us to transcendental categories because transcendental categories exist, and you're using transcendental categories. That's circular.
No,
it doesn't tell us anything.
Wait, no, I didn't say anything regarding transcendental categories. You are.
No, because
I literally said nothing regarding a transcendental category. If the problem that I'm having is anything that's transcendental, as in beyond space-time, we can't invoke concepts like category because that only works within space-time. Again, I bring to you cup, which only can possibly exist within space-time because it possesses the properties of the universe, of the fucking fabric of space-time to allow this thing to exist in order for us to look at it and then output out that this being like other things.
So do
you see the problem?
You can argue. I can grant that you can argue using sense data that something can exist. That doesn't tell us anything else about it.
Yeah, it does.
Where do you get telos from?
We do tests
existence?
with it, and then we do predictions with it, and then we get actual values out of it.
And where do
Like
you
we
get
can
telos
measure
from
the
this?
exact amount of volume out of this thing, right? Like I could sit there, do
Yeah.
the math on this, and get
Yeah.
a very, very accurate prediction as to how much water goes in this thing.
And where does this tell you the telos of a cup?
What
do you get
I'm
the
saying, all you
telos of
have
a
to
cup?
work off of is space time. However, it is you that
Exactly.
is saying
You
that there's
can't
something
have
outside of
telos.
space time that invokes these things. And I said, fine, fair enough. But why would you
Hey, wait.
anthropomorphize that thing? And this
You
is also
can't
under the
justify
assumption that
telos.
it's not asymptotic. That's a whole nother discussion. It is
You can't
totally possible that the universe is asymptotic, and the concept of a beginning of a universe actually makes no sense. That's totally also possible. That is just as possible as it's just as possible as there being this non-anthropomorphic entity that makes all logic. But again, like, why would you assume the anthropomorphization? It makes no sense.
You keep bouncing around. I'm gonna go back to the cup.
I'm not bouncing
You can't
around.
justify. You can't
It's the
justify
same thing.
the telos of a cup from the sense data that you get from looking at a cup. Nothing about the cup tells you the telos of the cup.
You are
would
missing
you argue
what
that-
I am
Oh, wait.
saying. I'm
And-
going to
and you're
stop
missing what
talking
I'm
about the
saying. I've
telos of
been
a
saying
cup.
this-
I
I've been
understand
saying
your
this from the
position.
beginning.
Your position is that there is a God that invokes
No,
all
I'm-
logic, right? So such as like the concepts of cup and the presupposition of cup, it must come from God. Fine. Fair
You're-
enough. That's what you think. I'm saying you cannot assume that off of the basis of something that is anthropomorphic. And here's why. I gave you that it is impossible to assume something being like an object or A being like a things if it exists outside space-time, because it requires space-time to invoke such logic. So no, it doesn't work.
I'm not saying that it's like those things. I'm saying it's a very foundation for
I'm
what
saying you
those
can't
things
operate on
are.
those foundations. The foundations only exist within space-time. You don't know what it's like outside of it. It is totally
The
possible that
telos
it
of a-
invokes all properties and no properties at the very same time. Whether or not that even makes sense to you is irrelevant as to whether or not that actually happens.
Telos does not exist in the physical world. You can't get telos
I
from
understand that.
anything
I'm talking
within
about
the-
things outside of
But
space-time.
wait. But you're using.
You're not getting it at all. Not
you're
even a
using
little
tele-
bit.
You're using teleology to try to gain an understanding
No,
about the world.
no,
when
I'm
you
not.
Can't even,
You are
there's-
applying the teleology and you can't understand outside of it. You're stuck in your must be God complex, and I'm telling you that there are other answers. The presuppositionalist argument is not the end all be all. That is not how you argue.
Forgive me, my mind's all scrambled. I gotta take a second to
Gotcha.
cool down a bit.
How much time do you need? Do you need a bunch of time, or do you want me to move you to the stage?
I don't know. Here I'll hop back on in a sec.
All right. It was good talking to you, buddy.